Like it or not, there's a certain kind of authority and charisma and command that only older men possess.
If you would like to interact or chat on my live streams, make sure you check out my links down below for my other YouTube channel and my Twitch. Also my Patreon, where I have more content on there that you haven't seen if you haven't joined.
Ellen, I'm pregnant.
Whose baby is that? Who's the man who did that to you? Gator's bitch better be using Jimmy's.
Today I'm going to be reacting to Critical Drinker, Why The Last of Us is Falling Apart.
Another week, another episode of The Last of Us to get through.
Oh my god!
And I say it that way because that's exactly what this show is starting to feel like for me. Homework. Some mildly unpleasant tasks to be completed as quickly as possible, instead of a rollicking good piece of entertainment that I can't wait to experience week after week. And apparently, I'm not the only one to feel this way, as the show's lost almost 20% of its audience by episode 3, and its Rotten Tomatoes score has plummeted to just 49%, officially marking it as rotten for the first time.
Wow, crazy how, people could get really disappointed in the game after this very big event takes place, and the same thing happens on the show. People could say, well, it happened in the game. Why would the audience expect something different to happen if it's based off of the game? But the even bigger point would be, if people are this disappointed and you're losing this much viewership because people didn't like the big event that took place, well, you as people, producers, people who are responsible for the second season of The Last of Us, if you saw how well the second game performed and you still chose to essentially stick to that story, then you can't be shocked that the audience still hates it after that major event that took place.
Golly gee whiz, I wonder what could have possibly caused this.
I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It jumped up a notch.
It did, didn't it?
The thing is, almost everyone knew this was coming. Everyone who played the games knew that killing off Joel was going to put the show into a death spiral that it would struggle to pull out of, as the narrative devolved into a grimly sadistic misery simulator where every major character dies or ends up broken and alone. Everyone who watched season 1 could have told you that Bella Ramsey's Ellie wasn't going to be able to carry a show like this without Pedro Pascal there to support her. Everyone knew this was coming except for HBO, apparently. You know, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. And if that's the case, then I think Neil Druckmann needs an intervention pronto because...
in technical terminology, he's a loon.
But from a writing point of view, I think it's actually worth explaining why killing off Joel was such a massive mistake, both in the games and in the show, because this ties into a much bigger issue about character relationships and the importance of having balance and contrast in your stories. And the reality here is that without Joel, The Last of Us has no emotional heart anymore.
Watch it and then complain about it. I can already hear people say, well, if you don't like it, don't watch it. But it's just an interesting thing to see that a lot of people didn't like it, and I think that aspect was actually blamed on gamers, oh, it's just raging gamers, and now it's actually being shown, oh, okay, so it's not gamers' fault anymore. It's actually a lot of people, a lot of people's cousins, moms, everybody, a lot of people watched the show, and were disappointed and also thought that it couldn't be carried by Bella Ramsey / Ellie's character. The second season sounds like it was doomed, considering the second game didn't have a great story and people didn't like what Ellie as a character turned into, and the fact that in the first season people didn't even like the actress.
See, the first game, and to some extent the first season of The Last of Us, both successfully tapped into one of the most compelling and universal character dynamics in all of fiction. The bond between a father and his daughter. Yeah, it was definitely an unconventional version of that relationship. Ellie wasn't really Joel's daughter, and they didn't even meet each other until she was an adolescent, but the all-important dynamic was still the same. Joel was the experienced protector and father figure, and Ellie was the young and vulnerable daughter that he had to guide, protect, and watch over. He was jaded, cynical, and pragmatic, hardened by a lifetime of tough choices and brutal survival, while she was idealistic and maybe a touch naive, eager to see the world without knowing much about how dangerous it could really be out there. Obviously, she was no match for him physically because he was a grown man and she was a little girl, and if anything, she's actually a burden on him at first. She doesn't know much about hunting or survival, she makes a lot of mistakes that almost get them both killed, and despite all her bullshit and bravado, she's actually pretty scared and intimidated by the world around her. It made for a great contrast, allowing them to spark off each other, provoke and challenge each other, and grow and develop in interesting ways. Because of Joel, Ellie gradually learns how to look after herself, how to survive in a harsh and unforgiving world, to the point where she even has to step up and become a protector for him when he's badly wounded. And because of Ellie, Joel's demeanour slowly softens as he warms to her and starts to see her as more than just a package that has to be delivered to a destination. He begins to see her as someone he genuinely cares about, a surrogate for the daughter that he lost 20 years earlier.
Gosh, honestly, could sit here and write out after freshly watching season 1 and playing the first game, and probably couldn't have put it together as clear and concise and as short as Critical Drinker was able to do it. That was such a good explanation, and kind of brought back memories as to, oh yeah, those were some of the little things that didn't make the show bad at all, but slightly stood out as different from the game as to why personally would think that the game is better.
Joel brings out Ellie's inner strength, while Ellie brings out Joel's humanity. In a neat piece of narrative give and take, they each fill gaps in the other's life. The show mostly managed to replicate this dynamic in season 1 despite its best efforts, and the reason I say that is that you can tell they did everything in their power to toughen Ellie up and break Joel down, bending the dynamic as far as they could possibly go without breaking it. The Ellie in the show was much more confident, assertive and capable right from the start, easily taking control of conversations and disagreements, rarely showing any fear of Joel or the world around them, frequently disobeying his instructions and mouthing off at him as if a 50-year-old man with a gun that she barely knows is the kind of guy you'd want to risk pissing off.
Joel did come off a bit less decisive, maybe a tiny bit weaker. Nothing that completely destroyed his character. Definitely some choices were made, and there were some different dynamics. And they stood out because in the game he was definitely more hardened at the beginning, but not hardened to where his maybe slight trauma or PTSD from losing his daughter stood out that much in the game, but they did bring attention to that in the show. Same with her mouthing off to him. That didn't really happen that much in the game. Maybe 1 or 2 times she was being a little sassy, but it always came off as more playful, where she was jokey or just because she was naive and she was a child, but never annoying. Not like that typical trope that a child tough guy or girl is in a lot of media. Ellie genuinely didn't seem that way. Just slightly mouthy, slightly sassy, but not directly disrespectful to not only a guy who could easily kill her if he wanted to because she doesn't know him, but also somebody who is doing her a huge favor because he's protecting her while transporting her to a location that would probably be better for her overall because she thinks she needs to go there.
TV Joel, on the other hand, is much less decisive, capable and stoic than his game counterpart, even at the beginning of their journey together. He suffers from panic attacks, he's starting to struggle physically and often seems to be at a loss for what to do next. He frequently gets flustered and outmaneuvered in conversations with Ellie, and he even defers to her when it comes to making decisions, as if a 12-year-old girl who's never been outside the walls of her hometown is the kind of person you should listen to in a life or death situation.
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
So yeah, there were little things in the show in season 1 that it seemed like they were trying to bend without completely breaking it. So you could have opinions one way or another, not even noticeable enough to point it out, or noticeable enough to be like, okay, well, what are you going to do with that? Because if you went any further, you're just changing the dynamics of the characters.
The subtext here is that TV show Ellie has a lot less to learn from Joel than her game counterpart, that she needs him less. There's less of a contrast between them, so the father-daughter dynamic is weakened considerably. It's not destroyed completely, but it's far inferior to the game. And that's not even taking into account all the shameless political pandering the show indulges in.
Communism.
Nah, it ain't like that.
It is that, literally. This is a commune. We're communists.
This place actually fucking works.
You see, kids, if everyone just pulls together and does their part, communism really can work for all of us. To find out more about how you can get involved, contact your local political commissar now.
There's there's people who are too lazy to write their own stories. And fine, don't call it laziness, but you're taking a name of something, Star Wars, a Disney movie, whatever you want to take, and you want to redo it instead of just coming up with a different story because you want to ride the wave of, oh, people already like this. We can just mooch off the fact that this name already has a fan base, so we're basically guaranteed to make money even if we don't try that hard. That's already its own category of don't do that. But you're taking something that's already been done and people didn't like it, and you only change parts that people liked.
Still, it was enough to keep audiences happy with season 1 of the show. That, however, is gone now. Joel's dead, and instead Ellie is left with Dina to play off of. And well, that's a whole different dynamic that's considerably less interesting. Why? Because there's no contrast between these two characters. They're about the same age, the same gender, and roughly the same level of experience and competence. Even their personalities are broadly similar. Yeah, Ellie's a bit more serious and focused, and Dina's a bit more outgoing and playful, but there's really not that much of a difference between them. Joel and Ellie's relationship wasn't just a broken man and a frightened girl trying to find a way to connect with each other, it was a clash of different generations and worldviews. Joel, who still remembered the old world before the collapse, and Ellie, who was born into the new world but still has to experience it. Joel's maturity and experience versus Ellie's youthful passion and curiosity. Ellie and Dina don't have any of that because they're so similar, it's more like watching a person talking to themselves. Their scenes come across as flat, dull and tedious, and not just because the actors don't have much chemistry together. Neither of them has anything particularly interesting or insightful to say. They don't offer contrasting opinions drawn from different life experiences. They don't even have different physical capabilities that might offer some kind of contrast in how they approach situations. They're just two asshole teenagers meandering through the world, swapping shitty jokes and speculating about stuff that they don't really understand.
Yeah, you could say that. Like, if there's an older man in the show, Joel, and then you take him out, and he's replaced with somebody who's just like Ellie, it's going to feel like there's an empty hole that wasn't filled. It's not even like Tommy's more prominent in the show or game, so he's replaced with Dina. Like, Dina's Ellie, so now there's two Ellies, and Ellie's talking to herself. Oh, do you think this, Ellie? Yeah, Ellie, I would like to go live on a farm. Wow, Ellie, you would like to do that? Yeah, I just want to, like, it's the same person, so what a good point to point that out.
And how can I put this? Teenagers aren't exactly the most interesting people you'll ever meet, and for obvious reasons. They haven't seen and done enough to mold them into interesting people yet. They're more like houses that have just been moved into. Yeah, the potential is there, but there's none of the interesting decoration or personality that builds up over time. In fact, when you think about it, the three main characters in this show now are all pretty similar. They're the same gender, roughly the same age range, the same size and build, and the same level of experience. Again, there's no real contrast between them, and so there's less to get interested and invested in. It also means that this show is badly missing gravitas. Like it or not, there's a certain kind of authority and charisma and command that only older men possess. Young guys don't have it and women don't have it, and when you erase it from a narrative, you'll lose that sense of believability and gravity that a show like The Last of Us is desperately striving for. It doesn't have it now, and you won't find it with characters like Ellie, Abby and Dina. All of this is my long-winded way of saying that killing off Joel was a huge mistake in the games, and it's likely to be just as damaging to the TV show. Not only was it a shitty way to kill off such a popular character, but his death leaves behind a narrative hole that nobody else is capable of filling.
Gosh, almost sounds harsh. There's a certain, what word did he use? There's a certain narrative, there's a certain thing that only older men can bring to the table that no younger man and no woman, just period, no woman can bring to the table like they can. Yes, even an older woman could bring something different to the table, but the show isn't about an older woman having any dynamic in any place. The show is about an older man having a father-daughter dynamic with a younger girl. So you take the father-older man dynamic out, and it feels more than halfway empty.
All of this is my long-winded way of saying that killing off Joel was a huge mistake in the games, and it's likely to be just as damaging to the TV show. Not only was it a shitty way to kill off such a popular character, but his death leaves behind a narrative hole that nobody else is capable of filling. They really did try the same thing as before, and surprise surprise, they got the same fucking result. And they really have no one to blame but themselves. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
There's not a lot of character development because she started off strong and kind of didn't really need Joel. Now that Joel's gone, she's going to be the same bland character that you turned her into anyways. So yeah, good luck with the rest of the season 2. Maybe we'll not watch it, doesn't really matter, but not really shocked that it didn't do well considering a lot of people didn't like the second game. You're probably going to get the same result with people being upset with the series if you keep the majority of the things that people didn't like in the game in the show. I hope that you guys liked it. If you haven't already, make sure you check out Critical Drinker because that's where the video is from. And if you haven't already also, I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. I forgot what to call it. Like and subscribe. Go check out all my links and I'll see y'all next time.